arrived at this picturesque place, like something out of a storybook, you know? Cobblestone streets, charming old buildings, but oddly quiet, like eerily quiet. I thought it was just a quaint, sleepy town at first. Then I noticed this guy. He was just off. Wearing tattered clothes, he stood across the street, staring at me. No smile or anything, just staring. Gave me the creeps, but I brushed it off as small-town curiosity. But then, he was everywhere I went. The cafe, the market, always just there, watching me. I started feeling like I was being tracked. It was getting to me, especially at night. The town felt different in the dark, almost like it was whispering secrets. A couple of days later, things got real scary. I was walking back to my inn, and there was this dense fog all around. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see him, right there, following me. My heart was racing, and I just ran, the fog making everything look the same. He was always just a few steps behind me. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. Then I ran right into him. But get this, he looked scared, almost as scared as I was. He handed me my notebook, which I didn't even realize I'd lost. He was just trying to return it, but he was so shy and awkward. He couldn't find the words. I felt a mix of relief and embarrassment. But here's where it gets truly bizarre. The next morning, I mentioned this to the innkeeper, expecting some small-town gossip or something. His face went white. He said there was no one like that in town, not for years. Then he told me the story. Years ago, there was a guy named Samuel, a bit of a loner. One night, a girl was found murdered, and Samuel disappeared that same night. The town was shaken, and over time, Samuel became a ghost story. And the guy I described matched Samuel perfectly. I rushed to my room, and in the notebook, I found a note. I just wanted to be seen, to be remembered. You saw me. Thank you. It was in this shaky handwriting. I realized then I wasn't followed by some shy guy. I was followed by a ghost that matched the description of an accused murderer. I packed my bags and left that town as fast as I could. The quaint streets, the charming buildings, they all seemed so sinister now. I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me, even as I left.
Years later, I still remember that evening like it was yesterday. I was just a teenager then, walking home through the streets of our small town. It was one of those towns where nothing much happened, a place where every face was familiar and every corner held a childhood memory. The air was crisp with the onset of fall, leaves crunching underfoot as I strolled, lost in the mundanity of teenage thoughts. It was on that ordinary walk home from school that I first encountered them. The tourist couple who seemed friendly at first glance, but oddly unsettling. They stood out immediately, an anomaly in our sleepy town. The man wore a wide-brimmed hat and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, while the woman had a scarf draped elegantly over her shoulders, her gaze sharp and piercing. They approached me with an air of cordiality that felt overly rehearsed. "Such a charming town you have here," the man said in a tone dripping with insincerity. They asked me about local landmarks, their questions probing, almost invasive. As our conversation drew to a close, they extended an invitation. "We're attending a local event tonight, a sort of gathering for travelers and townsfolk. You should join us. It'll be a delightful experience," the woman suggested with a smile that seemed more a warning than a welcome. Despite the alarm bells ringing in my head, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to attend, unaware of the nightmare that awaited. The rest of the day, the invitation lingered in my mind, a mix of excitement and unease. As evening approached, I found myself walking towards the location they had mentioned, an old, secluded warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was a place usually avoided by locals, surrounded by overgrown weeds and with a reputation for being haunted. As I approached, I noticed flickering lights and heard the distant murmur of voices. The setting sun cast long shadows, giving the warehouse an eerie, almost sinister appearance. Stepping inside, I was greeted by an unexpected scene. Dimly lit lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a gloomy glow over the small crowd gathered inside. The atmosphere was oddly muted, the air thick with an unspoken tension. I scanned the room for familiar faces but found none. It was then that I spotted the couple, their smiles too wide, their eyes scanning the crowd like predators. The couple welcomed me with an enthusiasm that felt disturbingly forced. They ushered me deeper into the warehouse, where the crowd seemed to part for them. As I followed, a sense of dread settled over me. The air was stifling, the dim light playing tricks on my eyes, making shadows twist and turn in unnatural ways. It was when they led me to a secluded corner that the true horror of the situation revealed itself. Hidden from the main area, I saw unsettling symbols etched onto the floor, and an array of strange, archaic objects laid out in a precise pattern. The couple's demeanor shifted dramatically. The facade of friendliness fell away, revealing a chilling intent in their eyes. They began speaking in hushed, urgent tones about a ritual and how fortunate they were to find a perfect participant from the town. In a moment of desperate clarity, I feigned a stumble, knocking over one of their bizarre artifacts. As they momentarily diverted their attention, I seized the chance to bolt. I dashed through the maze of people, my breath ragged with fear. The couple shouted after me, their voices sharp and commanding, slicing through the din of the confused crowd. I weaved through the warehouse, my mind racing for an exit. Behind me, I could hear the couple's footsteps, their persistence fueling my terror. I spotted a small side door, half hidden in the shadows, and lunged for it. Bursting into the cool night air, I didn't stop to look back. I ran as if the devil himself were on my heels, the couple's angry shouts fading into the distance. The dark streets of my small town had never felt so alien, so menacing. I kept running, not knowing if they were still behind me, my only thought to put as much distance as possible between us. Years have passed since that terrifying night, but the memory remains etched in my mind. I never saw the couple again, and no one else in town seemed to have encountered them. The event changed me. The naive belief in the mundane safety of my small town was shattered forever. As I recount this story now, as an adult, I can't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't escaped. The encounter with the couple remains a haunting mystery, a chilling reminder of the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most ordinary places. Reflecting on those days, a chilling thought often crosses my mind. Around that time, there were whispers in town about people going missing, faces that one day were there and the next, simply gone without a trace. As a teenager, I never paid much attention to these rumors, dismissing them as town gossip. But now, as I look back, I can't shake the feeling that the couple had something to do with it. Their sinister presence, the fear I felt that night, it all seems too coincidental. Were they preying on our small town, leaving a trail of unexplained disappearances in their wake? The possibility haunts me, the unanswered questions lingering like shadows in my memory.
I remember that night vividly, working late at the Whispering Willow Cafe in our small town. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, a cozy sanctuary with the aroma of coffee and baked goods filling the air. I was there alone, as usual for the late shift. The cafe had an old-world charm, with its dim lighting and vintage decor. That evening, town was quieter than usual, with a thin mist enveloping the streets, giving everything an ethereal quality. Little did I know, the serenity would soon be shattered. The evening was ending, and the cafe had been deserted for hours. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of my coffee cup. That's when he walked in, just as I was about to flip the closed sign. He was an unfamiliar face, tall, with a gaunt appearance and a deep-set gaze that felt unsettling. His clothes were slightly disheveled, and he carried a sense of unease around him. He ordered a coffee, his voice barely above a whisper, and chose a corner seat from where he could clearly observe me. As the minutes ticked by, his presence grew more unnerving. He sipped his coffee slowly, never taking his eyes off me, his expression unreadable. The cozy cafe suddenly felt too big, too empty. Time seemed to crawl as I began the closing routine, wiping down tables and stacking chairs. Glancing over at the man, I noticed he hadn't moved. His coffee barely touched. His eyes followed me around the room, never blinking, never straying. I felt a chill run down my spine. Trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy, I continued my work, though my hands trembled slightly. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, mustering courage, I approached him, informing him that the cafe was closing. His response was a slow nod, but he made no effort to leave. My heart raced as I locked the front door, the key clinking loudly in the lock. The realization that I was alone, locked in with this stranger, made me feel trapped. My earlier calmness replaced by a growing sense of dread. With a deep breath, I turned off the lights and urged the man to leave. He stood up, his movements deliberate, and finally exited into the night. I waited a few minutes before stepping out, locking the cafe behind me. The streets were unusually deserted, the mist now thicker, wrapping the town in a ghostly shroud. I started walking home, my steps quick and uneasy. After a few blocks, I sensed it. I wasn't alone. A quick glance over my shoulder confirmed my fear. The man was there, trailing a few paces behind. Panic surged through me. Each streetlight I passed under seemed to cast more shadows than light, and the mist muffled the sounds of my hurried steps. I quickened my pace, my heart pounding in my chest. The man matched my speed, his presence a constant threat, lurking in the shadows. The world around me morphed into a twisted maze of fear and shadows. His footsteps were a relentless drumbeat in the silence. Each step, a thunderous echo in my ears. I darted through the mist, the cold air slicing through my lungs, my heart a frantic drum in the hollow night. Streetlights flickered above, casting eerie, dancing shadows that seemed to reach out for me with ghostly fingers. Panic surged like electricity through my veins as I glanced back. His figure was closer now, a dark, menacing shape cutting through the fog. His footsteps sounded like the heavy thud of doom, each step resonating with my pounding heartbeat. I could almost feel his breath, icy and foul, on the nape of my neck, sending shivers down my spine. My legs felt leaden, heavy with dread, but I forced them to move, stumbling over unseen obstacles in the dark alley. The grim realization hit me. He was toying with me, savoring the chase. His presence, an oppressive force that threatened to engulf me in darkness. Panic propelled me through the murky streets, my screams still echoing in the cold night air. I didn't dare to stop. The relentless sound of his pursuit etched into my mind. Reaching the dimly lit storefront, I collapsed against it, gasping for breath. my heart pounding in terror. A haunting silence enveloped me. Had I escaped? My eyes searched the swirling mist, every shadow a potential hideout for him. The feeling of being watched, hunted, clung to me like a second skin. Somewhere, hidden in the darkness, I knew he was still there, watching, waiting. The night had eyes, and they were fixed on me. As I stood there, trembling, a figure emerged from the shadows. Relief washed over me at first. "Are you okay?" he asked, concern in his eyes. Very quickly, however, relief turned to horror as another figure appeared behind him. The unmistakable silhouette of the man who had been following me. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. My heart sank. They were together in this sinister game. I had accepted my fate. I had accepted that tonight may be my last.